Hello, and welcome to this episode of Brave Enough to Fail's Boss Academy, where students get the tools to be the boss of their dream. I'm your host, Sadie Ray, and my guest today is someone who has traveled a long road, literally, to get to where she is today. And that's why her story is included in our special American Dream series at Boss Academy. Our special guest today is an operation leader with over 20 years of experience in strategic planning and process improvement, leading client experience and business analytics teams at Gartner. She also served as the lead in building the Offshore Center of Excellence for Business Analysis. They helped the research and advisory business to grow its footprint and retain its client base. Wow. Now, please welcome Ms. Janine Wakim. Thank you so much for joining us and for making time for our students today.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here.
We're excited to have you. So today we're going to go through what you do, where you came from, how you got to where you are today, and some struggles and setbacks you may have faced along the way. And lastly, how any of our Boss Academy students who might want to follow in the same path as you can do so. Sound good?
Sounds perfect. I'm happy to do that.
All right. So first we're going to talk about we're going to talk about your story. So let's start at the beginning. Where are you originally from, and what was your journey like getting from there to where you are now?
Sure. I mean, I think, and I'll ask a question. So, literally from, like,
Yes.
well, my parents came to the United States as refugees from the Middle East. And that really is very defining. That's sort of where we're from. We're American by choice. I'm American by birth, but as a family, American by choice. And my parents very much espoused that in this country, your name means nothing. You're going to need to work hard, speak English very well, and show your worth. And that really was our story growing up. My I was a witness to my mom and dad earning master's degrees at night. They would work during the day. We would make our way to school and back home on our own. And they would work during the night. And that was a huge inspiration. And when they did have free time, they looked at our coursework and informed us that we could do better. It didn't matter what we did. It could be better. If it was a 95, it should be a 98. If it was a 98, it should be a 99. Or, if you did get 100, was their bonus. So very much pushed us to succeed. And the sciences were a theme in our home because I think that it's sort of a universal, math and sciences are sort of universal. That was an area where my parents could lean in a little bit more, and it was success could be measured clearly. And so I'm one of three siblings, and we all sort of entered STEM fields. And it problem solving came kind of naturally to us along the way. In high school, we are graduates of the public school system, obviously. My parents, had the means to get us some very basic items. We're disappointed because, in their country of origin, higher education was funded by the state. In the United States, it's not. And so we would look for scholarships. We had a number of jobs on the side. And then in college, I continued on had a bit of a working scholarship, and then I also kept busy with my own small business on the side to fund additional items. I used to type people's essays, which has nothing to do with math and science, but it was a way for me to make some extra money. And after graduation, I worked in finance, which I enjoyed. And then I also pursued evening hobbies, volunteering at the local hospital, and ultimately I ended up combining those two and worked in both sort of math, doing analytics, but also working in the healthcare sphere. So in some cases, I just worked for organizations that were truly finance and IT. But now, as an operations lead, I'm actually working in the healthcare sphere, which is a joy, but able to use my finance side. So that's sort of a very quick summary of my journey. I know that I have glossed over challenges, and I'll tell you why, because we never saw them as challenges. We always felt we were very blessed. And our biggest obstacle was just, finances and needing to work harder.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing those bits of your story with us. So, now I'm going to ask you, you know that the Brave Enough to Fail message is risking failure to follow whatever dream is in your heart. And I've heard my dad say a particular saying a couple times, and I want to know your thoughts on it. He says that often some of the people who believe the most in the American dream are the people who are from somewhere else because they have a different perspective on opportunities that people who live here might not see because we're so close to it. So, could you share your thoughts on the American dream as you see it?
Oh, yeah. Well, my dad is almost 90, and he will say, he will start crying and tell you how blessed we are to be in the United States. And my family came, both of my parents' families came from, their families were in position, they had professional positions, and, they weren't too concerned about where to find their next meal. And then the climate in Egypt at the time changed very, very rapidly, and it was not possible to get a job. We were not accepted for certain positions in schools, and so you had to escape, literally escape. And luckily, the United States was able to accept them as refugees. And my father left alone. He was one of three children, and his message to his mom to let her know that he was okay. And this is after a few years of no communication, was just a blank postcard with the Statue of Liberty on it. And that was their signal that he made it safely to the United States, and he kept it. And and he's told us he lived at the YMCA when he first came to the U.S. He washed dishes. He was a chemical engineer. He had gone to school for that, but he washed dishes in the United States, and he produced his resume at a typewriter store nearby. He pretended he was looking at the typewriters, put his paper in there, and and he again never says it was difficult. He really doesn't. He never says it was difficult. He saw the opportunity. There was a door that had closed for him. It was because of who he was, and where he prayed, he could not get a job. There would be nothing for him in his country, and he had to leave. And whether it was washing dishes or staying at the YM, that was something. And then there was the hope for more. And my mom was the same story. She came to the United States as a refugee, one of 5 children. She came with her mom, and she taught, she tutored, and she worked at a nursery school until she, even though she had a master's degree in Egypt, she got a second master's degree in the United States ultimately, and she could work as a librarian here. And for them, that was it. It was a matter of getting one door to open and another door to open. And for us, I remember very vividly, I had 3 jobs at one year when I was a senior in high school. We had very basic items. I never worried about where I would get next meal, but everything was pretty basic, and we were working pretty hard, all of us. We would all clean the house. We would all clean the lawn, take care of the lawn. We all had jobs. We all had to do well in school. And then I remember my mom drove me to the hospital, and I was 14. And she said, "You're going to volunteer now at the hospital." And I said, "Why? Why am I volunteering at the hospital?" And she said, "Well, when God gives you the ability, you have the obligation." And they never saw the challenges. They saw all of this opportunity, and they actually thought that we were blessed. We were very lucky, and we could take on more. And that was always sort of our credo. And in a way, it's tough. It's tough to work that hard, but sometimes you have to. And, and ultimately that hard work creates its own success.
So you would say that America is definitely a land of opportunity, but you have to be willing to work for it.
And there's no job beneath you. There is no job I won't do. And, it doesn't, you have to show people what you're capable of. You need to be in the mix. And yeah, to get in the mix, you need to put yourself out there in whatever sphere you can be. Because, my dad always said, you can't be a candle under the table. Doesn't matter how fabulous I am or how fabulous you are. If you're not in the mix, if you're not out there being part of it, you're not going to rise. We want to rise, and you have to do all of this work to rise. But first, you have to get out there. And in the United States, you get an opportunity to get out there.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you so much for that. So, we all have obstacles that we face and challenges that we have to overcome in life. How did you find the courage and the strength to keep going when you faced certain obstacles and setbacks?
Well, I would say our biggest obstacle was finances. And the cure to that was to keep working. And and it's not always easy to find that first job and to manage your budget. And I think a lot of people were surprised in college where I had an extra side job. I would take work wherever I could get it. And I was also a big sister at that time. I still made time to volunteer. But I don't know how, it's hard for me to instill it. It, we can all do more. My parents, I felt like they never sat down. They were always working. And if you put yourself out there, if you work, and also if you ask people for help, if people see that you're making an effort, and then you ask someone for help. I was blessed with some great mentors, and they didn't knock at my door offering to help me with my resume. No one said, Janine, here's a promotion, or Janine, there's a new job. You have to put yourself out there, and that's part of being in the mix. And it's not a straight line up. Sometimes, sometimes you feel like you're on the, in the chutes and ladders game. That might be an old game. Sometimes you might feel like you're on the chutes, the chutes career ladder, but keep persevering because life is long.
Absolutely. So now we have some questions from some of our Boss Academy students. This first one is from a student at Scotticoke Middle School. How did you figure out what you were passionate about and what you wanted to do?
It was I'll tell you a really terrible experience that has seared something into my brain, and hopefully it will help you. It was my first day of my first full-time job. This was at American Express. I was a financial analyst, and I think it was my first meeting, and I walked into an office and so gung-ho, and the gentleman said, so what would you like to do? And I said, I want to affect positive change. So, I want to, and it's like, I want to make people happy. I want to make a difference. And he said, well, you'll need to find another job, which was so terrible. So here I am at whatever, 22 or 23. And I said, I then said to myself, well, am I passionate about finance? And there are aspects of finance I liked and aspects of finance I didn't. I loved numbers. I loved doing math. And so wherever possible, I loved to figure out those puzzles, and I kept that part of it. At night, I used to volunteer at a hospital because I loved people. I didn't always want to sit at a computer. And I used to volunteer with children with cerebral palsy at night at NYU. And ultimately, I went back to school and I got another degree in public health along with continuing with business. And then I found a sweet spot working at health insurance companies, which allowed me to work in both with numbers and then also make a difference in healthcare. So the path doesn't come early. I reflected on the fact that I had volunteered at hospitals and I loved it, and I loved human beings. I didn't always love sitting at a desk, but I loved numbers. And then you have to spend some time to reflect, try different things. That goes back to the Shoots career ladder that I referenced. There's nothing wrong. You need a bias for action. Take a risk, try something, either part-time job, volunteer job, or even full-time job. And if it doesn't work out, it's still great. Take a step back, figure out what it was about that job you didn't like. Because you didn't dislike everything. You disliked certain components of it. And then for sure you won't do that. And then think about some of the items that were bearable and what could you build on. I hope that helped.
Yeah, that's a wonderful piece of advice. Thank you so much. How important is it to be able to communicate effectively with people you don't know?
It's really important. Your influencing skills is probably one of the most. So I used influencing instead of communication. There's communication, you need to communicate clearly. And probably the big brother of communication is influencing. And that is the art of not only communicating, but convincing people to support you or do what you recommend. And that's like getting a mentor, aligned with getting a mentor. That is one of the most important things you can do. And my recommendation is, so on the communication side, one, speak English brilliantly and know your audience. There's an expression, don't be tone deaf. If you're speaking to me, I will not enjoy hearing you start a conversation with, hey. I don't respond to that. You need to use language that's appropriate to my age and learn that young and learn that well. Know who you're speaking to, learn that, because we all want to feel seen and heard. And when you're new in an organization and you see and hear me and you talk to me, recognize, not just like with respect, but also understand my language, it makes a big difference. Speaking to me at my level, and often people at my level are people in power. So figure that out early, and then it will help you. And then also, during your break, if you see me, someone like me, not busy, knock at my door or stay 10 minutes after at the end of the day and knock on my door and say, hi, I just wanted to say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm working on this project. If there's anything that you need help with, I want you to know I'm super interested and I love working at such and such company. That's the start of influencing skills, and it sort of combines communication and influencing. Those are, aside from some basic skills, the most important things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Now
Sure.
we are running out of time, so my last question for you is, what advice would you have for our Boss Academy students who might want to follow in the same footsteps as you? How do they sort of get to where you are?
Sure. So in business and analytics and data analytics, it's an interesting field right now. After undergraduate, if you want to get a master's degree, it's about a 9-month degree, and there's some at UConn. Stanford offers like a business analytics degree that's just 9 months. So that's after you've completed your undergraduate. So if you're interested in sort of STEM or math, and you're interested in business or data analytics, there's some basic courses like Python that are super important, or SQL. These can be learned undergraduate, and then you can do a 9-month program that's night or during the day. Those will open a lot of doors. And then the second thing, again, in my field, there's people who are technically adept, it's really important. Those people who not only know those basic skills, but also understand how the business works, are the people that are going to really succeed. And the way you figure out how the business works is just asking questions to people in other departments. And put yourself out there, be genuinely curious, and then that's the recipe for success.
Absolutely. Miss Janine Wakim, thank you so much for all of the different advice you've given our students today and for giving those students your time.
It's my pleasure, Miss Sadie Winsley. It was so lovely speaking with you, and you're onto something great here. Take care.
Thank you. And I'm your host, Sadie Ray, and remember, you are the boss of your dream.